Hello.
On to this week, and may we start with something from me, just in terms of big news, really,
Yeah,
in
yeah,
the
totally.
York
But
art scene.
can I interrupt straight
Yes, do a
away?
first
Somebody
interruption.
from Yes, somebody from Bertie got me the Peter Doherty book. I like the lad. His autobiography,
Yes.
and I'm not the most biggest Libertines fan or Pete Doherty
Mm.
fan, but interestingly, on page four, I've learned a new thing already. I always assumed he was like a born and bred Londoner, but in fact, apart from being born in Hexham, his RAF dad, got moved around a lot. So he actually spent time at Catterick Garrison in North Yorkshire, which isn't that
Who
far from us.
who knew? Well,
Who
that
knew he was
certainly
a
didn't seem to
Northerner?
have.
Who knew Pete Doherty was a Northerner?
I never knew that. Now, Graham, I gather actually with that book, it was as much it was about what he had to leave out as to what he could put in, apparently. But obviously, one isn't aware of that
Imagine.
once one's reading it. But apparently, that was the case. Now,
Yeah.
with that in mind, sort of going on to a different subject, if I may, only just in passing, really, to acknowledge big news coming out of York Theatre Royal, and in turn, big
Yeah,
news
yeah.
going into Sheffield Theatres. Tom Bird, being chief executive at York Theatre Royal since he moved to the city back end in December 2017, kind of took the post up the next month, and he's overseen therefore 5 years at the Theatre Royal, and
Hmm.
I guess it would have been great if he'd stayed for longer, but I think it's a career that's been on the upward curve. If you work at the Globe in London as he did, and you work on the Cultural Olympiad, I'm not saying that York Theatre Royal represents just a stepping stone, but I think there's a natural progression to a theatre like Sheffield Theatres, which is seen along with Leeds Playhouse as the big league theatre up here, and made massive strides under various different artistic directors over the years. Now under Robert Hastie, and Tom, I think, will bring the energy and vibrancy that he brought to the Theatre Royal. And he also, while in York, oversaw, in some ways, a difficult decision to do, which was to bring a close to Berwick Kaler's run as the longest running pantomime dame in the country, and to bring a new future to pantomime in the
Oh
city.
dear.
I mean, I
Yeah, yeah.
put in my little piece today that he ruffled feathers by doing that, a terrible bird pun. But
So did he do that last year? How recent was this?
so the way that worked was Berwick announced his retirement, 40th anniversary pantomime and retirement, and the following year Berwick co-directed it, didn't perform in it, and there was it was a polar mint shaped kind of pantomime. There was a hole in the middle without him, and nevertheless, decision taken at that point, we're moving on. And the Theatre Royal went into partnership with Evolution Productions, who also happened to do the pantomimes at Sheffield Lyceum Theatre, award-winning pantomimes done with Paul Hendy writing scripts, and in York's case, Paul doing the scripts to work with Juliet Forster, who's the creative director. And they initially did, under those pantomime restrictions that everyone had in 2020, they did a socially distanced version of the pantomime, which they took by van to various wards in the city and put them on in community halls. And that
Yep,
was,
that's all good and well, child. But what's happened to the man who's retired?
no, he hasn't retired, he's made his comeback.
Yeah, but no, the Theatre Royal, obviously.
No, so Berwick Kaler, now you'll be seeing his pantomime from December the 10th at the Grand Opera House. So basically,
Oh, good
he's
grief,
been the
rivals.
equivalent of
It's like
going
Anto
from
Wars.
Celtic to Rangers, or vice versa.
Yeah,
Big decision to
but
make.
that's basically Panto Wars. That is.
No, Graham. Now you say Panther Wars. You're not allowed to say Panther Wars. That's not what it is.
Well, okay,
And Tom,
okay. What is that?
slap wrists, Graham, slap wrists, because it's not that. These are two
No,
theatres where
no.
there's room to have pantomime at both. But this isn't.
Ah,
But
is
what
it two
Tom was
Panto
looking to
City then?
do, if what Tom was looking to do was to find a way to move the Theatre Royal pantomime forward, to play to a new generation, a younger
Yeah, yeah.
audience. And
It makes sense.
you could argue that it was quite a ruthless decision to do that, but I think it's fair to say that it's been borne out as a decision. That last year was the first one back in the Theatre Royal. Again, Paul Hendy doing the script, very well cast. a very enjoyable show. Berwick had his pantomime at the Grand Opera House, and he's got a Berwick Caler Appreciation Society.
Have you seen both pantos? Have you seen both pantos?
So last year I did. Obviously this year, well, tomorrow night I will see Theatre Royals.
Okay, so who wins this battle of
it is
pantos
not a
in the
battle.
non-panto?
Graham, I don't know what is getting into you tonight. Can you just stop not playing along with the fact that in York, everyone is happy with each other and it's not a turf war, okay?
Is it all peace and love?
Yeah, what it is appreciating that York loves pantomime. There's an audience for Berwick's show, and there's an audience for this new
So which
version
one's
of
better,
pantomime at the
Charles?
Theatre Royal.
Which is the better panto?
I am not entering that debate, Graham, whatsoever. I am not doing turf wars. And I think, look, the reality is the Theatre Royal felt the need to move on and move forward. And I understand the thinking behind that. Berwick Caler still has his fans. Berwick still has his fans in York and who want to see him perform. Berwick Caler's Appreciation Society. This isn't the only thing that Tom Bird did, by the way, at York Theatre Royal. So I want to let's move on from turf wars and look at other things that Tom.
Let's not go on too long about Tom. I mean,
I don't want to go on too long, but it's fair to say, Graham, that within the area that we cover, York Theatre Royal is a significant producing house.
Yes. So what about the future? Look to the future rather than like going about how brilliant Tom was. Obviously, he was brilliant.
I understand that, Graham. All I would say is just other memories. I'm going to get some water soon. Kiev City Ballet coming to York. Take over. I'm getting a throat problem. Just briefly on Tom, brought Kiev City Ballet to Britain for the first time. Brought Wise Children into partnership with National Theatre for Wuthering Heights. Has overseen continuing development of community theatre, which was a great passion of Damien Cruden before him. So thank you, Tom, for excellent work in York, and very best wishes for taking on Sheffield Theatres and continuing the wonderful work that's been done there too.
So can it carry on being just as good? Because in a smallish theatre, the personnel matters a hell lot more than a huge institution, which is like a tightly constructed.
That's a good question, Graham. That's a good, because the role, there is no artistic director's role as such now at the Theatre Royal. Tom changed his title from executive director to chief executive, but retains an involvement, had always retained an involvement in the programming, working alongside creative director Juliet Forster, who, to all intents and purposes, is partly doing an artistic director's role, but there are others involved in the programming at the theatre as well. John R. Wilkinson is involved in production work there too. And so it's Tom's overview in tandem also with the board has been very important. And I think, again, if we're not going to have full-time artistic directors post there, it's a more modern way of doing things, if you like. And
it only works if the people who are not artistic director have a creative bent. If they all actually are just straight doing the job that the title says, it would not work quite as well. So, for example,
I would agree. And Tom
David
obviously
Bowen is chief executive, but he's very creative. He's a playwright, so it totally works.
David Bowen's a very good example of that, and Tom is another example of that because of the work that he put on at the Globe. And I think you're right. I think that when the Theatre Royal comes to looking for Tom's replacement, I think it is important to have that creative element there, that programming savvy. You need to have that a combination of a commercial sense of what will do well, because increasingly, while repertory work is very important, you've got to have the balance. And York Theatre Royal has been introducing more musicals than it used to do. This is a sensible policy because you've got to get bums on seats. You have to do that. But it's also important to put on new work. And while I was a little disappointed in both the community play this year and Guy Fawkes as well, these were the two new big productions of the year within the Theatre Royal, I will always defend the importance of putting on such work, having new plays, bringing the community to do pieces. Next year, there'll be a play, Sovereign, done as a community cast again, C.J. Sansom's Henry VIII play. And that's something that the momentum will continue.
Sounds like he's programmed quite a lot next year anyway.
So Graham,
there isn't a problem.
You are asking all the right questions tonight, because the Theatre Royal has in place already 6 months of work. And I don't know when Tom, whether he was headhunted or whether he applied for the job to replace Dan Bates, who's moved on to do the Bradford City of Culture 2025. But in place, 6 months work. And that's a good legacy to leave as well. I think you got that time to get the decision right from the Theatre Royal. And this is a crucial post to get right. And I have every confidence that Tom has facilitated where that should happen.
And you're sure Tom didn't leave for any reason related to the non-Panto Wars?
The non-what, Graham?
Panto Wars. It's not related to the Panto.
No, because he's transferred the Theatre Royal pantomime to a new era. I don't know why you keep bringing this up. There is a new age of pantomime at the Theatre Royal.
I'm the Panto villain.
Well, you are, and I'm not going to rise to any debate on this. I shall review both pantomimes in the next week ahead with complete fairness. Over the two of them. I am not entering Panto Wars. I am judging them individually on their merits.
Excellent. Good to hear, Charles.
I'm moving on to your next interruption.
Well, my next interruption is, did we ever see First Aid Kit?
Yeah, no,
we didn't.
They're one of my great frustrations, never to have seen First Aid Kit.
Who did we see that supported the Handsome family in that amazing little venue out?
Not First Aid Kit.
Not
First Aid Kit, because I wanted to see I wanted him to take First Aid Kit there, and he could nenever get First Aid Kit to play there.
Oh, well, I keep on hearing on BBC Six Music, and they write very good songs, and the harmonies are amazing.
I was listening to Spotify, if one mentions it by name, to Spotify, and First Aid Kit on there, and I didn't ask to play the entire new album, but a lot of the new songs were to the front of what Spotify is playing from First Aid Kit, and those new songs. They're developing
very strong,
a wider breadth of musicianship, but at the heart of it still is that magnificent sense of harmony that they have. Unfortunately, now First Aid Kit have become too well. Actually, as long ago as when the band room at Low Mill was putting on acts, really even in the early days of when I suggested to put on First Aid Kit, even then they were kind of out of the price bracket as I understand it.
Good grief. I'm surprised because I never thought they were that big in the first place.
They were big enough. Even I mean, the Lion's Roar. I mean, even then, that sold well. And amongst, I mean, they're one of those bands that was always, right from the start, got a lot of airplay on Six Music. But I've frustratingly, as with you, never seen them live. They are right up there on my list of bands I want to see.
Fab. Anyway, let's make a point of doing it at some point, Charles.
I agree. Let's do that because that would make you and I deliriously happy. Now, Graham, we love journalism films, being journalists, and I haven't yet seen She Said, but I am curious to see it. And this is She Said, film starring Carey Mulligan and the other actress whose name escapes me. And as you put it nailing Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah, well, the other actress in it is Zoe Kazan. She's the other main female actress.
Zoe Kazan. And you've made the point that it's all the president's men for the 21st century. So maybe, Graham, just a little bit
I think we should say that, Charles, because that implies that women's film has to be compared to a film about men. In that some way, the film's only good if it rises to the high standards of men. So I'd like to withdraw that remark straight away.
Fine. Right. A little bit of synopsis on both that, but also the culture of journalism. Well, also the culture of journalism films.
It's a great film, Charles. I mean, it's called She Said, and I say it's very good. And I was quite surprised because I didn't expect it to be anything except okay, quite good. But it's actually, I prefer it to Spotlight, and Spotlight won Oscars, and it was a very good film.
Spotlight did win Oscars. Why do you prefer it?
It's fantastic because it follows all the procedure of a journalist very well. So the female characters, the main reporters, played by Carey Mulligan and Zoe Kazan, the two reporters from the New York Times, I think it's Megan Tuo and Judy Cantor.
Correct.
Well, it follows how hard it was to get the story written about Weinstein and all his appalling behavior towards women over many decades, despite lots and lots of complaints about him, and despite what they knew, it was hellishly difficult to get to write a story because him and his supporters thwarted journalists at every turn and threatened people and undermined them and bullied and used the law against good folks the whole time. And also, before I watched the film, I knew he was bad, but the film isn't particularly graphic about anything.
No.
But just seeing the story to a degree about his behavior, it was absolutely appalling. What a terrible, terrible, terrible bloke. absolutely dreadful, and years of sexual abuse and rape. And the fact that actually Judd appears as herself because she was one of his victims makes the film so real. Although obviously it's a film, it doesn't feel like work of fiction. It does feel completely like a work of fact, and it's just very well made, very well scripted, great dialogue, great cameo appearances by various actors, including Samantha Morton, who's so good, and she's
Yes,
only
I've
for
heard that
5 minutes. She
tremendous.
only
Yes.
stays the whole film. Absolutely fantastic acting. So it's just a good film from start to finish. Just bloody excellent.
In all the President's Men, which we're not comparing it to in terms of male
Ah,
journalists versus female journalists, but in terms of how journalism is presented, there, if you remember, the deep throat character was the deep throat character fictional? Am I right in thinking that?
I seem to vaguely remember there might have been one or two deep throats as opposed to just one, but there was some
And
sort of deep throat.
was there an equivalent in this? Did they
Yeah,
use a kind of deep
there
throat
was
measure?
yeah, there was no character called Deep Throat. They didn't give any of the characters silly names,
No.
but there were a couple of people that the two journalists constantly talked to,
Yeah.
not on the record but off the record, to get information about Weinstein and also to see whether they could get towards write the story, and that happens throughout the film. So there were sort of characters that were a bit like Deep Throat. I mean, in terms of the structure and the narrative, it was very similar to the Old President's Men, which it would be because it's about wrongdoing covered up and the perpetrator using every means at his disposable to try and avoid justice, which is exactly the same as All President's Men. So it is very similar in some ways, and I think it deserves Oscars. But two things I really liked about it was it starts off with a little dig at Trump for his sexual behaviour, which isn't even necessary for the film. They've just done it partly to get your attention straight away, but also like we're going to have a dig at him as well because he's never really got caught, which is really great to see. And then at the end, although you hear Weinstein's voice on the phone a
Mm,
reasonable amount, the last half of the film, the one scene where you're supposed to see him, the director does not show his face once. It's almost like saying this film is about Weinstein, but we so despise him, we are
yeah.
not giving him any airtime. We're not
Yes.
going to give Weinstein the chance to look human. And it's a really nice touch that never show his face.
Mm.
Really, really good.
In
So yeah, I'd recommend it for certain.
in all the President's Men, it was that part of the focus was on the working practices of the two men as much as on the story itself. Would you say the driving force of this film is the testimony of the women in the film against Weinstein, rather than looking at the journalistic methods of the two reporters?
It does. It does both. It switches constantly between the tribulations of being a reporter trying to write a story about this and the terrible, you know, consequences of his actions on the victims. So it's very
Mm,
big in the victims getting a chance to speak, but it gets the balance just right. Everything about the film's right. The tone's right. The balance is right. There's not a misstep in the whole film. It's very good.
I mean, journalistic offices have largely changed, as we know from working within them. But in terms of the newspaper that they worked for, probably there are actually numbers still working within a newsroom that might be more as we remember it being. And therefore, I just wonder
You're not joking.
how different it is from the days of All the President's Men, how it presents journalism.
Well, it basically, apart from the use of modern technology and computers, it seems
Yeah.
exactly the same. And the facilities in the New York Times building in the film, if it's accurate, they've
Mm.
got loads of staff, they've got loads of facilities,
Oh,
seem to have
those were the
lots of money,
days.
and the canteen is the nicest canteen you'd possibly want in a newspaper office. So it just looks like heaven on earth for journalists. I don't
Mm.
know if that's totally true, but I haven't seen anything like that for a long time in Britain.
I mean, we've seen journalistic methods come under heavy scrutiny, leading even to the death of the News of the World. It went that far in this country as to what the hell was going on within journalism and the standards of journalism. Is this a piece that, as was the case with All the President's Men, puts journalism in a good light, and which it needs every so often?
Completely. I mean, that's another thing about it. I mean, it doesn't quite portray journalists as saints, but it's not that far away.
Yeah. Well, I've never thought of you as or me as a saint,
But
Brian,
American
but
films tend to be, to use the expression, less nuanced. I mean, if you want the rare
yes.
British films that are made about journalists are a little bit less gung ho on how absolutely brilliant and fantastic journalists are, whereas
Mm.
American films tend to have a clear hero. when it comes to films about journalism. The journalists are always heroes in American films. There's very few American films that portray journalists as anything but high-minded and well-intentioned and very respectable and reputable.
More often than not, journalism representations in plays over here tend to be cliched, inaccurate, and portrayals of lots of people standing there with notebooks endlessly nodding, which isn't how journalism is at all.
Well, I think British journalists in general are a cynical bunch, so I don't think British journalists would represent themselves properly anyway. And whenever there's a book published by a journalist, I never trust a word of it.
Why not?
Because they know the game, and they know that they're not really there to tell the whole truth. They're there to achieve certain ends. So even when they're writing about themselves, they're trying to achieve a certain end.
So a Tony Parsons type book, a Julie Burchill type book.
Yeah, well, they're very honest in some ways, but in other ways they're so egotistical. You can't, who knows how much of that is entirely balanced and totally.
Maybe the one counter to that would be Alan Rusbridge's book, I think, which is trying to look at the way ahead for journalism.
He's a very sort of reasoned, one step at a time type guy, isn't he? Rather than passionate. He doesn't go for big hyperbole or picking himself up. So you can imagine it's
absolutely
probably pretty straight.
I mean, and that's where it would differ from a book by a Piers Morgan or whatever, where there's a sensationalist element and a me element. And Alan Rusbridge was never about that. So She Said, currently showing in plenty of cinemas. Actually, it's getting good exposure at the moment in cinemas, which is good to see. Graham, talking.
Although it hasn't done as well in America as expected. In fact, most films in America have not done as well this year as expected, apart from Top Gun Maverick. So box office in America is still not doing very well after the pandemic. In 2019,
that is a bad sign, Graham.
Yeah, it's not been disastrous, but it's almost come back to 2/3 its usual capacity, maybe 4/5, and it's showing no signs of ever getting back to 100% what it was in 2019.
So it's needing some big hits over the winter. But let's have lots more. Let's have lots more.
Streaming's having an effect. Well, yeah, so the Marvel film has been a big hit.
From one court case of one sort to another. We've already mentioned Night and Day music venue in Manchester. You've got an update on this, the court case beginning over the future of Night and Day. What can you reveal to the listeners?
Well, it's a very important case because Night and Day is a brilliant venue. It's not that big, but so many big acts have played there. And it's a proper old-fashioned venue. And there's no trickery about it. It's been going on for 31 years. And recently, Matt Healy, the singer of 1975, came out supporting it as well as Elbow and all various other bands. Yeah. And it's a strange case because Manchester City Council professed to support Night and Day, but Night and Day has taken the City Council to court to appeal against a noise abatement order issued by Manchester City Council, which purports to totally support Night and Day. And when it comes to the actual complaint that led to the noise abatement order, and the case started just this week, it's because of one neighbour on the same road as the Night and Day Club who moved into a converted warehouse during COVID, i.e. he's only been in his apartment for a couple of years, and he complained that the main problem was DJs playing till 4 a.m. with very loud music.
Yeah,
which could easily be true. But on the other hand, until they converted the warehouse, the empty warehouse, that really wasn't a problem. So it's almost like, you've got a street where things happen, then suddenly they create some new apartments, and suddenly the street that's been there for years with people merrily doing their normal business suddenly can't do the normal business because someone's converted something into flats. It doesn't seem to be a good way of planning anything.
I suspect we're going to get quite a lot more of this, Graham, because we're seeing flat conversions in commercial parts of cities catching on. This is one of the trends that's likely to gain momentum. And you can see it's almost inevitable you get NIMBYism that will go with that.
But if you were going to move into a new apartment, wouldn't you check out the street before you moved in?
I didn't
move it. I didn't move into an apartment in the centre of Harrogate about 20 years ago when I could have done. And one of the thoughts in my head was, it's near pubs, how noisy it's going to be.
Yeah.
So you would have thought that when they did these conversions, that the new residents would actually have worked this out, that perhaps there might be some noise.
Perish the thought, Graham, that whoever pays up the most money will win a situation like this.
It's a bit like, remember when Sunderland used to play at Roker Park? And
Yes.
Roker Park, as you know, was completely surrounded by terraced brick houses,
Mm.
right up to almost the entrance to the actual ground.
Just like Main Road, like Main Road in Manchester. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit like moving to a new house, or rather an old house, in the street that Roker Park was on, and then complaining that on a Saturday there's like tens of thousands of people milling around outside my house. I don't want this.
No.
Well, why is this allowed to happen?
And it's that thing of what was there first. That was the community that you would arguably say, well, you would want to say matters more, particularly in commercial zones within cities where you want thriving nightlife. And that should take the precedence. I do think it's going to become more difficult the more that conversions of flats take place. I think you're going to have more of these disputes happening, and I think you're going to get more decisions that are regrettable.
At the end of the day, it's another example of where individuals' interests take priority over community interests. Yeah, and if one person's viewpoint is the most important over a community's viewpoint, we're going in the wrong direction.
Well, it's going to set, I think, a dangerous precedent. A decision like this, definitely, and I do worry for it. I do worry that there will be more of this. I have to say, and I think it's important to protect city culture that's there. The catch-22, though, Graham, in all this is how you keep streets busy and thriving if they're going to lose, in particular shops, I guess, what you do to replace them. And this increasingly, as I say, is involving flats. And I think you're going to see more situations like this between the wishes of those who want to sleep and the wishes of those who want to live and have a bit of fun.
Who want to party all night.
Yeah. We're better than 24-hour party people than a happy Monday's Manchester. Now,
well, exactly, yeah. I went to
an interruption. An interruption.
Yeah, I went to Deershed Christmas party at Brudenell Social Club in Leeds last Thursday. And Deershed Festival in North Yorkshire is fantastic. Indie, folk music, science, arts, literature, comedy. About 11 years, maybe 13, and set up by, I think it's from 1,000 people to 10,000 people quite quickly, and kept it that size because they like high quality, not just in terms of the acts, but it's a very civilized, exceedingly well ordered and well run festival. Yeah. So every year, recently, he's been having a Christmas party at the Brudenell, which is obviously a fantastic venue in Leeds, almost like sort of like East meeting West, because the sort of acts that play Deershed also play Brudenell, and the sort of people who go to Brudenell should be going to Deershed. So I went along, and it was a great event. Saw a couple of new acts, and I talked to the co-founder Oliver, who's slightly worried about the cost of living crisis in terms of ticket sales next year. Although the lineup,
Oliver Jones, is that right? Isn't it?
Yeah, Oliver Jones. Yeah, the lineup already looks great, and the early bird tickets I think have sold out. So he's probably worrying too much. But anyway, I saw two bands who were up and coming: Skinny Palembe and Pale Blue Eyes, and. Skinny Palembe is from Johannesburg originally, but lives in Doncaster. And he was amazing. He was sort of like a young modern version of Jeff Buckley, sort of rock, but Jeff Buckley type rock. Yeah. Very sort of arty and angular, and kept on changing style, and all very, very interesting. And then Pale Blue Eyes were a bit more straightforward, a bit more sort of like krautrock meets Velvet Underground. A nice groove going the whole time. I really love Pale Blue Eyes and Skinny Palembe. The interesting thing was that I've heard them on BBC Six Music, and I assumed because they were up and coming bands, they were both very young. And when I got there, I realized they weren't as young as I thought. And in fact, I think Skinny's about 32, which doesn't make him old. I mean, compared to you and me,
half your age, Graham, but that's not bad.
Yeah, but even 20 years ago, to be a newcomer at the age of 32 would have been quite unusual.
It would.
In the world of rock. Yeah. And I worked out why this was. It's because there's no TV programs for these bands anymore. Yes. There's no Top of the Pops, ITV shows no original young bands. Later's only on a certain number of weeks a year. So basically now you don't have to look young to be an indie star. Whereas
No.
before, if you looked a bit old as an indie star, that was a handicap because rock and roll and stuff's based on looks as much as music. Except it isn't
Exactly.
anymore. Everybody streams, everybody goes online. Unless you actually got the gigs, you've got no real idea what they look like unless you watch the videos or what
Mm.
age they are.
You've been listening to the podcast Two Big Egos in a Small Car. Your hosts were Graham Chalmers and Charles Hutchinson. This was a Baltic sub-production.